So just to give you a little agenda about what we're going to be talking about tonight. So I'm going to go over the basics, which some of you probably already know a little bit about or a lot about, depending on your background, of accessibility and universal design for learning, UDL. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges and the solutions faced in online instruction. So we're going to talk about the challenges presented by different impairments, just a brief overview and solutions, as I mentioned. So we're going to go over visual impairments, hearing impairments or auditory, physical or motor impairments, learning disabilities, and learning preferences. So obviously learning preferences, not necessarily a disability or a traditional impairment, but definitely something to consider when building materials. So first things first, before we get started, we wanted to figure out how many students have registered disabilities. So for 2011 to 2012, this is according to the National Center for Educational Statistics, 11% of higher ed students had registered a disability, and about 12.1% of K-12 had registered the next year. So the reason why I bold the word registered is because not everyone feels comfortable with disclosing their disability. So, there could be a lot of awkwardness involved with this. People could be embarrassed, or people could simply not know what office to disclose to, and I've seen that a lot as well. So those are just something to think about. And also, we're not going to get too much into the legal guidelines tonight, but there's the Americans with Disabilities Act and sections 508 and 504 of the Rehab Act of 1973, which really mandate creating accessible environments and an equal opportunity for those with disabilities, especially in education. So I keep talking about accessibility, and you probably know the term, but according to Quality Matters, I like this definition they provide. Accessibility is really the extent to which a product, service, or facility is available to all people. And so for us, since we're in the education field, we're talking about whether, the extent to which content in an online learning environment, traditional online learning environment, classroom, digital, or in person is available and accessible to all students. So really talking about whether it's available or not. So this is really a proactive approach, meaning that even if there's not someone with a disability in your class, that it's still accessible for them if there was someone to come into the class. And we usually talk about accommodations, and those are generally really reactive measures. So usually an accommodation will be provided upon student request, and there may be some sort of delay in providing the accommodation. So we want to go more towards the proactive approach where possible. Obviously, accommodations are necessary in some situations. And then universal design really goes hand in hand with accessibility. So it's a set of principles for curriculum development that really gives individuals equal opportunities to learn regardless of disabilities, preferences, or anything like that. And we're going to go over some examples a little bit later about what that means. So when I usually talk about accessibility or inaccessible courses, I like to think of content in sort of this locked box if you don't make it accessible. So each piece of it can consider putting each assignment, each reading, anything really that students have to interact with into this locked box. So what we want to do with universal design or accessibility is kind of take each material out of that locked box and unlock it for everyone, regardless of their disability, impairment, or preference. So there are really three keys to unlocking this and three methods of universal design. The first is representation. So that basically means different ways of acquiring information and presenting it to students, which we'll talk about. Expression, which is different ways to express or demonstrate what they know. So students really have a choice in what assignment method they choose. And then engagement. So this allows students to use their personal interests, maybe incorporate some personal connections, and kind of motivate them to be engaged with the assignment. All right.